Whether it's because of COVID or the technology age that we're living in where you can watch online, or maybe just because you've had a hurtful experience, we're seeing more and more Christians not attending church in person.
But is that a good thing? Can you really live out the life that God has planned for you without regularly gathering with other believers? That's just a few of the questions that we'll be tackling today on the Hopecast.
I'm Steve. I'm the Gen Xer.
And I'm Bethany. I'm a millennial.
We used to do morning radio together. Now we're podcasting.
And despite being different life stages, we're passionate about sharing ways to live out our faith in Christ.
And we have a lot of fun too. So whether you're old school
or new school,
you're going to find hope here.
Let's get started.
All right, welcome in, Hope Dealers from around the world. Switching cameras again this week. I don't know if this is going to be my full-time job from now on.
I think it should be. You can add that to your resume.
And those that are listening, they're like, what are you talking about? Well, we have a video version that we put out every single week at stephenbethany.com.
Right.
And if you're a Patreon member, you get it early before everybody else does. But, yes, we're in the new digs, the new studio. Mm-hmm. And TJ's like, okay, you guys are in charge, and we're like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And
that
means switching the cameras.
You love that.
So watch this. I don't know that I love that. See, there's Bethany right there.
Yeah.
Or no,
Hi.
that's me. I'm sorry. That's me.
He's still figuring it out.
And then there's Bethany.
Hi.
And then let's go back to the two-shot. See, because one of the cool things, if you've never seen like inside a production truck when they're actually a director there, here's what you have a director. Somebody would be like you. You would be the director watching all the different cameras on the screens, and then you would say call out a number.
Camera 2.
And then say take 2.
Take 2.
And then that's what you would do. And then do it again. Say
Camera 1.
No, but you got to say take 1.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Camera 3. Take 3.
There you go. See, that's how to do it. And that's exactly what it would be. I would be the technical director in that point. So I know nobody cares about this at all.
But you're excited about it.
But I'm kind of excited about it. But I'm nervous because I know it's not like it was with TJ running the camera and switching. So just a little grace.
Bear with us.
A little grace.
Hey, speaking of the new studio and being nervous, I have to just give myself a little bit of a pat on the back.
Take 4.
So we are in a new studio, in case you weren't aware. New studio. This is downtown in the city that we're in. And so we had to parallel park to be here.
Mm-hmm. Both of us.
I know. We've walked through fire to get here. Parallel parking. And your girl nailed it today. I was a little anxious because I don't normally have to parallel park a ton, but I did it. And the particular space that I ended up in, it was a little tight. Nothing was open. Apparently, everyone felt like staying in their offices today. So it was a little rough. I had to do a couple, circles around the block.
Did you?
I did to find some parking, but I found some, and it was in a tighter spot. So I had to do like the 26-point, shimmy to get into the parking space.
Yeah.
But I made it. I did it.
Good for you.
And I had a little help. My backup camera on my car helped me out a little bit. But
yeah, but you don't have like the actual parallel park assist that just
like
takes
the
some control.
Parallel. No.
You don't have that.
My car's not that fancy, but all I have is the like beep, 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 beep when you're about to hit something. That's what I have. So I shimmied my way into the parking space. I was a little extra nervous because across the street there were construction workers that were standing around watching.
That's the worst.
Right. It's like an audience. Like, I don't need an audience for this, okay? Right. I'm stressed out enough. Don't look at me. Like, do your own thing, That's how I felt. I was like, just go back to pouring the concrete. Focus on that. Don't look at me making a fool out of myself. But I parked and I did it.
It's very good because see, I did the exact opposite. I found just like empty, and I just I just went and because it's a one-way street, so I'm going one way, and I just zipped over to the left, right there by the meter, in and out.
Lucky. This was the other thing that stressed me out too. My nerves were already a little frayed because as I was trying to find parking, this fire truck came up behind me with the lights on, so I was trying to get out of the street. Like, I tried to get out of the way, and there were cars on either side. I had nowhere to go.
Goodness.
I was packed in like a sardine, and I'm like, where do I go? And they're coming over the hill. I could hear the sirens coming over the hill. They're approaching me. So finally, I like whipped it off to the side of the street. There was a car in front of me that didn't know what was going on either. He turned around, looked at me. I'm like, I don't know, buddy. We're in this together. And so we got off the road, and it was fine. Everything was fine, but I was a little anxious from that, and then the parallel parking situation. It was just a whole deal.
Yeah,
but I'm here, so it's fine.
Yeah, you have made it in, and we're thankful for that. As we get ready to talk about today's topic in the episode that we're getting ready to dive into, and that is about church attendance.
Yeah,
because I think what we're seeing more and more is people saying, I don't really need to go on Sunday anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really need to go because, hey, God doesn't say you have to go to church in His Word, or maybe He does. We're going to be jumping into that coming up in a little bit. But that's kind of the overall thought. And I think we started seeing that. You've seen it a lot anyway. But with COVID in and the era that we've lived in, it's kind of made it a little bit easier to say, oh, well, we can't make it now. Church is closed. So it kind of gives that, justification for it. Maybe it's the right word, I guess.
No, I think that's exactly the right word because obviously as long as churches have been providing kind of online streaming services and things like that, some people have stayed home and watched from home. That's just been a thing. But as soon as COVID happened, I think there was definitely a sharp drop off because people couldn't go to church. Like a lot of churches were just closed. Mine was, I think yours was as well. So for a few weeks there, for a few months, a lot of people were just watching online. They didn't have really any other option or any other place to go. But even after churches started to open back up and things kind of started to get a little bit better, or, some of the restrictions lifted a little bit, I think we did still see a lot of people that just really didn't go back to church. And I don't want to make this a whole thing about COVID. I don't want to go there. I think where I do want to emphasize is that obviously if you're sick, you should stay home. It's like anything else. But I think church attendance isn't something that's really talked about openly, but it should be because it's really, really important.
Yeah, and before we get any further, I meant to preface this entire conversation with this. There are people that physically cannot go.
Right.
There are people that are older that are, in the old days, they called them shut-ins. I don't know if that's a politically correct term anymore, but that's what
not
they used
able to leave their house.
Not able to leave their house.
Right.
So we're not talking about that. We're not talking about folks that physically are not able to make it to anywhere, much less to church. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about just regular folks who have been going to church but now have decided that they don't necessarily need to. So let's get that out in the open first. But I think you're right. I think there's always been that kind of a mindset of saying, I can worship God wherever I want to. And I'll just be honest with you. I mean, my dad was like that a lot of times. He was a big outdoorsman, and he said, I can worship God out here on the lake as easy as I can in a church. Now, when you start really kind of breaking that down, okay, can you? Well, yeah, I think you can. I mean, you can.
God's everywhere.
God is everywhere. So, yes, worship can take place. But do you? I think is the best question. And that's what I would ask him and not always get a satisfactory answer for me.
Right.
But the bottom line is I think a lot of people have that attitude, and I think that can be disruptive because it's taking that grace that God has given us and the Christianity that He has. He said, "Here's how you follow me." Well, it doesn't say in the Bible, quote unquote, that you have to go to church. I'm a Christian. I can go to heaven just as easy as anybody else can. I don't need church attendance. Well, I don't think that's exactly reading Scripture right.
Well, and I think too, here in the South, a lot of people hunt, and I know for sure, like, I don't know if you can tell in your church, but in one of the churches I grew up in, like, you could tell a little bit of a drop off the first weekend of like deer season.
Oh, sure.
You could tell because people would go to the deer woods and they would hunt. And so that was kind of where they would be on a Sunday. Or even sometimes in the summertime, you'll see a lot of families going to the lake and they're out there on the weekends. And so they're not super active in church in the summertime. There's just a lot of different things. But this is what I think. You can make a lot of excuses or have a lot of other things going on. And what I really think it comes down to is just priorities. Yeah. Because I'm not trying to be super judgy or really harsh. That's not my intention or my heart at all. But I think we rearrange our schedule for a lot of other things if there's a conflict with a friend, having lunch with a friend, and that runs into my kid's ballet practice. I'm gonna have to reschedule that. We'll work around that. There's priorities there. You know what's important, and you work your schedule around things. But somehow, in the last few years, church has lost its place in our list of priorities and things that are important. It seems like there's been a lot of people that have kind of just said, that's one of those things that maybe they've just not even voiced this, but it's just this kind of subconscious moving of the church to the back burner. And it's just it's like not even getting a second thought. It's just kind of, oh yeah, when we can go, we go. But if something else happens, that's fine. God understands. It's okay.
Oh, I've heard that a lot too.
Yeah.
God understands. Well, you've got this going on. You've got that going on. He knows you're busy. Well, when you start really looking at the Bible,
I think that's pretty faulty theology.
And I think, the first, what's the first commandment of the 10 commandments? You shouldn't have any other gods before me, is what he says. Then you start thinking about, well, he's okay with me missing? I don't know. Because, see, I do think you're absolutely right where it is a priority thing, but it's also a heart thing in the fact that, man, I look forward to going to church. I look forward to being there. And even when we had the COVID situation, I'm part of the leadership team at our church. So when we were just down to our basic people, I mean, it was just like our pastor, and he wanted the leadership team there just so he could have somebody to preach to because it was all online. But he just wanted like somebody there to bounce off and to make eye contact with. And so we were there. And still in a little church building, that seats, 500 people. There was, including the pastor, 6 people there or 8 people there.
Yeah.
It still was something special. It was still being in the house of God. And there was something you just can't take away from that. I can't necessarily put my finger on it, but you don't get it online. You don't get it from just watching a sermon. It's something special. And I think the reason why it's so special is because God ordained it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is something that you see very early on in the early church in Acts. This is what I love reading about is in Acts when it's kind of the first forming of the church, and you see these believers that are new Christians, and some of them have been believers for a longer amount of time, but they're coming together, and Acts shares that they had all things in common. They did life together. And I think that's just such a beautiful picture of God's design for the church, is that we're not supposed to do this thing alone. Like, life is really difficult. There's a lot of things that can happen in our lives that are frustrating and difficult. We need people around us that can support us and encourage us, and I think that's where the church comes in. People that are believers and understand and are just willing to kind of bear each other's burdens. But also, we come to church to worship the Lord. And yes, as we touched on earlier, God is everywhere. So whether we're dropping the kids off at school or we are out on the lake with our family, yes, we're able to worship God. But there is something about corporate worship, about coming together with other Christians and hearing from his word, singing together, worshiping together. That's something that's really unique and really special, and it doesn't happen everywhere else all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let me riddle you this.
Yeah.
Who created worship?
I mean, it's God. I mean, it's for him.
It is. He created it in the book of Exodus. I mean, when they were moving out and God put together a system of worship with the temple and the tabernacle, and it wasn't the temple then, it was just a tent. So it was a tabernacle, but he outlined how he was to be worshiped and why and what they were supposed to do. Here are the guidelines. I mean, it's just like everything else God does. He has guidelines as to what he expects and what he wants to accomplish. And part of that in our lives is gathering with other believers and coming together to lift his name up and to have it and to hear his word preached. And I think a lot of times we miss that. We just don't take advantage of it. And I don't think we have our heart right a lot of times. And I'll just speak again. Growing up in the southern part of the United States, in the Bible Belt.
Right.
Okay? And that is something where, everybody knows about church. Everybody's heard about Jesus and the whole thing. And so you get to a point where you're going to church and it just becomes part of your routine. Now, that may not be your life story and your, kind of history, but it is mine. And so people in our area where we're at, it just becomes another thing. It's as normal for a lot of folks as, going and doing your favorite hobby on Saturday morning.
Right, yeah.
It really is. Going and get breakfast at the local diner or going shopping at the flea market or whatever, a million other things. It's just another routine. So it loses its specialness, you know, because, and there's here where we live, there's a church on every corner,
right,
and every kind of denomination you could think of, non-denominational and everything else. And so the church for us becomes just kind of ordinary. And I don't think God ever intended it for it to be ordinary.
Yeah. And I think too that kind of along the same lines of we've made it ordinary, or we've made it a routine. And I think unfortunately too, it's been passed on like kind of through generations of if maybe you grew up in a family where church wasn't really prioritized, well, it doesn't have a whole lot of value. On the other side, maybe you grew up in a family where you went to church every Sunday, but maybe your parents never explained to you, why do we go to church? It just became a part of your everyday life of like, well, it's Sunday, so I'm here. Not so much of, we have the privilege to come to church. And I think too, I'm not trying to like guilt trip or anything, but like, this is just something that I always think about. There's definitely been Sundays where I've been like, I don't feel like going to church today. I'm tired. I had a long weekend. Sure. I want to stay home. I don't want to talk to people. I want to just rest. It's, you know, it's the day of rest. So I should just lay on my couch, right?
Absolutely.
There's totally that temptation, and I've definitely been there before. But something that I always think about is, you know, other countries, people either aren't allowed to come together and to have church, but they do anyways. They put their lives on the line because they're so dedicated to meeting together. And even if they have just a scrap of a Bible, you know, they don't even have the whole thing in their hands like we do. They are still dedicated to meeting together and hearing from God's word and just encouraging one another. And so, again, not trying to guilt trip, but that's something that I feel like the Lord brings to my mind when my attitude is not right, or my heart is not in worship or in the sermon when I'm at church, is like, there's people around the world that would love to be in your shoes, and you're somehow complaining because you had to get up a little bit early to go to church. Really?
Yeah. And let me give you a little bit of a real world example on that. And it kind of is what you're talking about, but a little different. And that is, a friend of mine went on a mission trip to China, and he said, the best worship experience I've ever had in life was at this Chinese church.
Yeah.
He said, I didn't understand a word that was spoken or a word that was sung, but for 2.5 hours, I was able to worship. And I think the reason apart for that, at least in part, is that you're able to come in with an expectation of, hey, I'm getting to worship, versus it's another routine. It's just something else that I do in my week. When you have that attitude, I think that's what you got to do to cultivate it, is to come with an expectation of, I get to worship. If that's not your heart, then all of a sudden you might as well not go.
Yeah.
You know, you might as well not go, I think, because you're just going through the motions. And look, and that's as worse, that's just as bad as not going at all. If you just go and you're just sitting through, waiting for the, you know, checking your watch, you know, looking at your cell phone, finding out what time it is before you can go and, you know, meet the Methodist down to the Cracker Barrel or whatever. You know what I mean?
That's something that that Cody and I, my husband and I, we've kind of tried to implement into our routine as we drive to church. So I think we've talked about this. I think I guess it's been like 1.5 years, pretty much, almost 2 years. We started looking for another church. The church that we were going to kind of dissolved, and so that was a sad experience, having to look for another church, and it's not fun and it's discouraging. But something that we implemented while we were going around visiting different churches was that we would just pray on the way there. And it's something that we've continued to do since we've found the church that we're a part of now. And something that we pretty much pray every Sunday is that the Lord would just remind us if there's anything in our lives that we need to confess of before we go to church, if there's any unrepentant sin or just anything that we need to do to get our hearts in the right place, that we'd be aware of that, and that our hearts would be open to whatever the Lord has to show us that Sunday. And that's something that I think is important, because you're right, we do need to come to church with clean hearts and with just the right attitude and the right mindset. Granted, when maybe you've got like 6 kids and you overslept and none of them feel like wearing shoes today, and it's frustrating. You know, there's definitely mornings where it's difficult to get to church and it's frustrating. But I think too, that's where, first of all, we don't have to be perfect to go to church. We can come and we can be like real and say, it was a struggle for me to get here, but I'm here. You know, that's the important thing. And I think too, that's where the body can come alongside and maybe come up to that mom that's had a rough morning and it's only 8:30 and saying like, do you want me to hold your baby for a little bit, give you a minute? Do you want me to hang out with your kids? Or, you know, I'll entertain them for a little bit while you go find a place to sit and you have a conversation. Like, I think that's where, as people and as Christians, we can encourage one another within the church of just saying, listen, I get you've had a rough morning. I have to. Let's hear from God's word together and be encouraged.
Absolutely. Now, there is another part of Christians that don't go to church, and it's more because of a serious aspect, because they've been let down or they have put their trust in someone and that trust has not been rewarded. It has been, and we need to talk about that. We need to set some guidelines and give some hope on that as well. We'll do that here in just a second. But Bethany, we also have a chance for listeners to partner up with us.
Yeah, so this is super exciting. We kind of are a bit of a small business. You know, we're a podcast that started about 2 years ago. And so we really are passionate about coming alongside small businesses and just encouraging them and promoting their business. And so if that's something that you or maybe somebody that you know would be interested in, we would love to partner with you through advertising. It doesn't necessarily have to cost you anything. It could be totally free. Just don't let the whole money thing hold you back. So reach out in the link in the show notes and you can reach out to us about advertising.
Absolutely. Yeah. We would love to be able to talk with you and to be able to bring your product or service, just like Bethany said, to our listeners and to be able to kind of just, you know, shake hands and have, hey, here's our listener. Here's our new friend that has a new business. So let's talk. So yeah, hit that link there on the show notes and we would love to visit with you and talk with you about that. So let's get back into it about people that don't go to church for more, let's say, concrete, real. I don't want to say that in a way that diminishes other people's
maybe
thoughts.
Just they've been hurt.
But they've been hurt by
people in the church.
By people in church. They have had negative experiences. So aren't they justified in not coming to church?
Well, to this I would say, I've had bad experiences in church because, unfortunately, in church there's still people, and so again, I'm not trying to make light of any bad situations or horrible circumstances, but I think we need to remind ourselves that the church is made up of God's people, but there's still people. There's still going to be strife and sin, unfortunately, and you would hope that being Christians, we would handle things in a way that's honoring to the Lord, even when we disagree, that we would be able to come together and say, listen, we have different opinions, but I still care about you, and there could be kind of some resolution there. That's not always the case, and that's really, really hard. And I hate hearing how people have been hurt by the church because I just, whenever somebody's told me about something that's happened in their life regarding church, I just want to give them a bear hug and be like, I'm sorry. That's awful, because that is something that's really painful. You go to church thinking these people will accept me, these people will get me, they'll love me no matter what. And that doesn't always happen. And that's wrong.
Yeah, if there was ever a place that needed to be safe, a safe space, it should be your local church that you can go to. But yes, that does happen. Mistrust of upper leadership sometimes, or just gossip,
division,
whatever. There's a million things that can go on that can really hurt you and hurt your family and hurt others. I would say to you, if that's the way you're feeling and you have kind of saying, hey, you know what, I'm a Christian and I love God, but I'm done with church. I'm done. I've heard this a lot. I'm done with organized religion because it's just phony and fake. Let me just encourage you about this. You can't give up on God because of the people around. God is still God, and there are churches in your area where you're listening to us that will take you in and that are, what it's supposed to be, the way it's really designed to be, reaching out to people. And again, they're hard to find sometimes, and I can totally understand that would be hard to trust and it would be hard to let yourself get back out there. But again, I think if that's your situation, if that's you where you're saying, I just don't know that I can do that again, I think you have to take the plunge. You have to take that leap of faith, because God does want us together worshiping. That's the way he designed it.
Yeah.
And again, it's horrible that people have taken your trust and taking your you're just advantage of you or your family. That's nothing right about that. But it still has to be something where you're looking toward God. And look, the thing you ought to do is ask God, look, I don't like this situation is obviously horrible. God lead me somewhere to where your word is proclaimed and people really do the things that they walk the walk and talk the talk kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's not going to be a perfect church. I think really very quickly we can kind of fall into the trap of idolizing the people and idolizing maybe the way it's set up rather than glorifying God and really just, I think, being grateful that we get to be a part of a church. I think, you can kind of hold other people up on a pretty high pedestal of like, oh, well, they're Christians, so they're never going to make me feel bad, or they're never going to hurt my feelings or whatever. That's not true. People are still sinful, and there's still going to be times where our feelings are hurt or things happen. But what I would encourage anybody listening, maybe that's been hurt by the church, is don't shut off the church as a whole. I'm talking about like the global church or the local church, just because of the actions of one or two or five of some people that that were a part of a church maybe that wasn't super healthy. Whether that be a pastor that wasn't...
Yeah, because we're in the day and age of celebrity pastors and where churches are built and founded by one person or one couple. Yeah. And a lot of times it revolves around them. That should be a red flag a lot of times.
Exactly. I think, and I'm not trying to like say, oh, everything that they say is wrong or terrible. But I think when we start to idolize people over really glorifying God and worshiping him and the attention being on him, that's a very, very, very slippery slope. And that's something that's obviously not honoring to the Lord. And this is what I would say too. Again, not trying to be harsh, not trying to be judgmental, but church is not about you.
That's right.
It's not supposed to be based around you. Church is meant to learn from God's word, to apply it to our lives, and to ultimately bring glory to God and to worship him. The attention should be on him. It shouldn't be about us. So there's not going to be any perfect church. And I get to, I've heard some people say like, well, we don't want to go here because there's not anybody our age, or there's not enough programs for our kids to be involved in. I get that, and I really understand that. I think that obviously you want people that you have things in common with to go there, and you want to have connections. I get that completely. But I think first and foremost, when you're looking for a church, or maybe just even when you're involved in a church, your prayer should be, God, if you would have us go here, bring us people that we can encourage, bring people that can encourage us, and let it all be for your glory. I think that should be our prayer, not so much, oh, well, there's not a class for my, 6-month-old to go to, so we can't go here. I don't truly believe that that's a legitimate reason to not go somewhere. I think our prayer and our goal should be for the Lord just to guide us to the right place, and then to find opportunities to serve in places to make an impact within that local body. But the heart of it is, we need to be in a local body. We need to be connected to other believers in our area, so that we can love on the church globally and make an impact globally. I think that's the bottom line there.
Yeah, and it's the impact globally, but it's also community here,
right
where you live.
Right.
I mean, it's what is it? And
both and
not either or. Right. It's both and. Absolutely true. And one thing I would just kind of underline here as we circle back and try to wrap this up is the fact that if you do have a vacation scheduled, or you do have to work on a Sunday, or that's fine.
Yeah.
It's when you make the conscious decision to say, I don't want to be here.
I think that's what it is.
I have other things going on that are more important, whether that's subconsciously or consciously. Your actions are saying, being in God's house is not important. I think that's when you need to check yourself.
I think kind of a real example that I've seen of this, my husband and his whole family, they grew up playing basketball. So my husband has 2 brothers. They were super active in basketball for a long time growing up. And when they were in, I guess it had been junior high, they would, go play tournaments and kind of travel a lot. There was a lot of that going on. And oftentimes those away games that were out of state would require them to be gone on a Sunday. They would play, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And my father-in-law at that point hadn't really taken his faith super seriously up into that point. And it's a whole story of just how the Lord really got a hold of his heart. So it's a cool story. But long story short, his heart was really convicted of, we can't be gone on Sundays, like to these basketball games. We can't be doing this. And so he made the choice of, they're going to play Friday, Saturday. We're going to drive. If we have to drive all night, we will, but we're going to drive back so we can go to church on Sunday. And that was a sacrifice, and a lot of people around them didn't really understand. But for Cody, my husband, and for his brothers, I think it was helpful and really something I think that encouraged their own faith to see their dad sacrifice something in order to go to church, saying, basketball is great. We love playing and the competition of it. It's important. But it's not more important than gathering together with other Christians and worshiping the Lord. So, that's obviously a smaller sacrifice than I think a lot of other people have had to make, but that is an example of choosing what's really important and prioritizing those things.
In fact, I would go so far as to say that might be an episode. We could do something on kids sports and the balancing act that is keeping the church, because that's a big deal. That's a lot of parents have to face and deal with. We'll do some research on that and maybe do a future episode on that. But as we conclude here today, just again, God loves you and God does want you in his church. And I think if you have that attitude and you have that heart of, I want to worship God, if nothing else, God, if you don't, I don't need anything from you, just to be in your presence. If we have that as our attitude heading into church on Sunday, I think it will revolutionize our church going experience.
Sure.
And I think it's almost an addictive thing. It's like, I want that again. It's a good addiction.
I think I'll come back next week.
I'll come back next week.
Yeah.
When you have that, then look out. That's when you really start looking forward to going to church every week. So I hope this has been an encouragement for you. We really do, so that if you've ever fallen into that trap of kind of sliding away, it is important to get back.
For sure. We would encourage you to pray if you're not currently active in a church. Pray for God to lead you to the right church.
Yeah.
Maybe pray for some friends to come alongside you if you need some encouragement to go. So that's what we're here for. We just want to remind you of the importance of these things and come alongside you in that. Absolutely.
So thank you for listening again this week. We really do appreciate you making us a part of your podcast routine. I know statistics say that everybody that listens to podcasts listens to about 7.
Right.
So we're one of the 7.
Thanks for being one of the 7.
Thank you for letting us be one of your 7.
Yeah.
So absolutely. So if you've got a friend that would be encouraged by what we do, please share it. Please let them know that Steve and Bethany do the Hopecast, and we'd love to be able to encourage them and come alongside them in their faith journey.
Reach out to us on social media. It's Steve and Bethany's Hopecast. Reach out through Patreon if you're interested in just supporting this podcast in a way that's not just financial, but really is just a community-oriented type thing. We would encourage you to join us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Steve and Bethany's Hopecast. Tiers start at just $5, so it's super affordable and just a great way to support this Hopecast.
And thanks to TJ at Blue Stream Media. He, all the lights, all the cameras, all the action. He is the godfather. He's the one right behind it, pulling all the strings.
Right, yeah.
And if you have a church conference, if you have anything coming up, in fact, the state that we're in, Arkansas, had a big conference. Who did they call?
TJ.
They called TJ and Blue Stream Media to make sure everything was working fine, and they did, and it went off without a hitch. So you can be like that too with your AV needs for any kind of event, large or small. Get in contact. Blue Stream Media, and you spell blue in this case, BLU streammedia.com.
I think that wraps it up for this week's episode of the Hopecast. Reach out to us again on social media. Let us know what you thought. We appreciate you guys listening. Thanks for being here.
Good night, Olive Branch.